want to thin out the peaches. I'm not gonna do all of them right now just because it's hard for me to let go of fruit. Even though I know it's best for the tree, I still find it really hard to cut some off and get rid of them because I think of the potential fruit, but I also know that it's really important to be able to thin the fruit so that I get the best, juiciest, most beautiful peaches possible. So right now what I'm gonna do is just thin out the double peaches. That's gonna make it easy, and then maybe tomorrow I'll come out and I'll thin some of the bigger peaches. That way I do it gradually because then it won't hit me as hard. If I find that if I have trouble thinning out fruit and I do it slowly over a period of time, I'm able to do it a lot better. But if I try to do it all in one go, I tend to just leave more on because I want to hold on to it. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm just gonna thin out a couple, just a few, because they're really starting to swell, and I want to make sure that I'm keeping the best fruit possible and I'm not waiting too long. To do this, I'm going to be using these little snips from Gardener Supply Company. I have some Corona ones too, and I think those work really good. Technically, you could also do it with your pruners, but I feel like that's easier when the peaches are bigger. But in this case, I just want to be as exact as possible. And then I have some rubbing alcohol right here so that I can disinfect them. Let me just open this up. Guys, oh, it still haunts me to this day, the grape pruning video where my pruners were so rusty. So I made sure to go through and oil all of them up and get rid of any rust, and so they're doing much better. As you can see, the tree is loaded with fruit this year. There's so many on each branch. So I'm gonna start to break up the clusters, but the first peaches I'm going after are the double peaches. And this is what they look like. They're like little conjoined baby peaches. So I'm just gonna snip that off, and they'll fall onto the tree, and that's fine. There's another one right here. So I'm gonna cut those off as well. Another one. There's a couple right there. So this is all I'm doing, is just cutting them off. Okay. See, even this one, they're starting to get pretty big, but they're double peaches, so I don't want that. I want to leave the single peaches because that way we get the best fruit possible. Here's another one. And then see, on this branch right here, we've got several. This one's a double peach too. I read online that a lot of times the trees can have double peaches if they've been under quite a bit of stress. And out of those two, that one was bigger. So, okay, I think that looks pretty good. Here's another one. Oh my gosh, do you see how many are on each branch? It would just be really difficult for this tree to hold on to every single one. And we would probably get some that get really big and some that are just a little bit more funky. So let me clean that up. You know what? It's not as hard as I thought it would be. I'm actually not struggling as much as I did in prior years to thin them out. I think just because I've already gotten a harvest from these, so I can be a little bit more patient. This one too. This one too. Okay, let me get to on the tripod. So I guess I'm finding out today that I'm doing a lot better at thinning, and it's not hurting as much as it does usually. So I might just go ahead and get the whole tree done. But let me just go ahead and set you down, that way I can work quietly. I think I'll start off with this branch. If there's any blooms left, I take them off to see whether it's going to be a single peach or a double peach. So we'll get 1, 2, and then 3, 4. Down here, there's like 2 more. Moving on to this branch, you see how close they are? Out of of these two. Oh, it's kind of hard to pick one, but I think I'll pick the lower one. This branch has a ton. That one looks good, but it already has one right there. My hands are so dry right now, you guys. I've been washing them so much lately. I also have to remember that these are going to get much bigger than this. So even though right now they're like these tiny peaches, over time they'll get bigger and heavier for the tree. Look at each of these branches. Oh my god, this one is loaded with so many good ones. But I know I for sure want to keep this one because this one's way bigger. Probably get rid of this guy. This one's, no matter what, it's going to be smaller because there's already much bigger ones ready. So, oh. Let's be honest here, neither you nor I want to sit here for like 10-15 minutes watching me silently chop off a bunch of the peaches on my peach tree. So I figured I would just go over a couple of things in regards to this particular peach tree, just in case you live somewhere where it's really hot, where you don't have a whole lot of chill hours and you're just wondering what variety it is, where I planted it, why I chose this one, and anything else that I can think of. So the first question is, where did I buy the peach tree? And this might be a little bit controversial because I know that there's a lot of reputable nurseries out there, especially online nurseries. I bought this tree as a bare root from a website called Willis Orchard. And the reason I purchased it from this website is because it was very inexpensive. I think it was probably like maybe between $10 to $15 when I purchased it, which is a steal because at the time I couldn't afford any super expensive bare root trees, and bare root trees are usually a lot more affordable than potted trees because you're not paying for the weight of the soil and the pot, you're just paying for the tree, and it basically looks like sticks with roots on it. But that makes it a lot more affordable, and actually I feel like the trees perform a lot better too because you plant them in the ground while they're still asleep, or you plant them in a pot or wherever you're planning to put them, and then they wake up in the spring and they're not as shocked as trees that are potted up and they're used to being somewhere and they're actively growing, and then you move them to some other place where the microclimate's different and the care for them is different, and all of a sudden you start to see a lot, or at least I started to see a lot of slowing down in growth, a lot of the trees just struggling and trying to acclimate and stuff. So anyways, I purchased it from Willis Orchard. Now this place is one of those places that, at least online, I've seen a lot of people complain about because some people say they have horrible experiences with the trees that they get from there. I have purchased a ton of the trees in Serendipity from Willis Orchard because it was just the most affordable, and even now everything just continues to go up in price, so it is still one of my go-to places to pick up bare root fruit trees because of the fact that I can purchase several for the price of one at other nurseries. And from my experience, I haven't had any issues with my fruit trees. A lot of the trees that you see in Serendipity are from Willis Orchard. And the only other plants that I feel like I didn't have the best luck with were some blackberry bare roots. And I don't know if it was the variety, if it was the actual bare roots that I received from this nursery, or if it was just a me problem, like I did something wrong. I'm more leaning towards the third one just because I remember being in a big rush when I was just throwing them into pots. So that's the only time that I've had any issues. But other than that, I've had great luck with a bunch of the fruit trees that I've gotten from there. Actually, honestly, every single fruit tree that I've received from them, I have had good luck with. The second question is, what variety is it? This particular variety is called the Florida Prince Peach. And why did I choose this one? Because it has a very low chill hour requirement. And
oh my gosh, that's looking so much
in the low
better.
desert of Arizona,
Oh my
which
gosh, this one
can
is like a
totally
triple peach.
vary
Look at
and
that.
differ depending on what area of Arizona you're referring to. If it's a high desert, it can get really cold and you might get a lot more chill hours, but in the low desert, it gets really hot. And over the years, winter has just become more and more translucent. And at this point, it doesn't feel like winter even exists at all. You get a little bit of what some might consider fall weather, and then the rest of the year it just feels like blazing heat. So because of that, I was very limited on the type of fruit trees that I was able to plant, especially when it comes to peaches, because there are a ton of peach varieties out there, but a lot of them require a lot of chill hours, which is certain hours where the temperature is below a certain degree. And if you live somewhere where it's really hot and it doesn't really get cold, the trees don't have what they need to be able to give you a good harvest of fruit. So a lot of the times either they'll struggle to grow or they'll grow but they just won't produce anything. So this tree only requires 150 chill hours, which is basically nothing. And that makes it a perfect tree for the low desert because it can produce very well even when it doesn't get as cold. And the fruit also tastes phenomenal. This is one of my favorite peaches because they're super freaking juicy, super sweet. And the last year that this tree was in the low desert, I remember bringing a bunch of those super ripe peaches to my mother-in-law's house, and I got to have this wonderful memory of seeing my gremlins and the gremlins of my in-laws enjoying the peaches and seeing all the peach juice run down their adorable little faces, and then them telling me that they loved the peaches. And oh my gosh, it just made it so worth it for me. And it's a variety that I adore. However, this tree, because of the fact that it's meant to perform really well in more hot, arid climates, or I don't know if arid is a part of that, but at least very hot climates, it's more adjusted than other peach varieties. But currently, I am no longer in zone 9B. I am now in zone 7. And let me tell you something. This tree is best suited for zones 8 through 10. So I don't really know how it's going to hold up once it starts snowing. I might have to go through and add some frost protection just because it can handle cold, but it's not really suited for a climate where it gets super cold in the wintertime. But who knows, we'll see. When I finally share the diary entries of Honey Oak Cottage, you guys will get to see all of the trees from Serendipity, and I'll be able to tell you how each of them performed or whether I've lost any. But in the meantime, let's go back to this tree. What size pot is it in? It is inside of a 25-gallon nursery container. I know that there's a lot of different types of tubs and containers that you can use. You can use concrete or metal or plastic, whatever your preference is. Personally, for me, nursery containers are my go-to, especially the 25-gallon sized ones, because they can hold a lot of soil, which is a good thing because it helps to insulate some of those roots from the tree, and I don't have to pot or do any sort of root pruning too soon. I can hold off for a while. And since planting this tree, well, actually, when I first planted it, I planted it in a 30-gallon fabric grow pot. And disclaimer, I don't like grow pots. I don't use them at all anymore. I mean, maybe now in zone 7 they would work a lot better for me, but in the low desert of Arizona, it was horrible, especially when I didn't have drip irrigation set up. The bags would just dry out so quickly because the low desert just feels like you're inside of an air fryer all day long, all night long. And so that made it so that everything was just drying out far too quickly. I couldn't keep enough moisture in there, and my trees were definitely struggling. And the moment I switched over to the super huge large nursery pots, they started growing phenomenally well, and I love them for that reason. But if you don't want to do like a 25-gallon pot, you can also do a 15-gallon pot. You just got to keep in mind that depending on how you allow the tree to grow, in my case, I was very meticulous about keeping their size in check. This is not a dwarf tree, but I pruned it in a way to keep its height a lot more compact, like a little mini peach tree. And I do that with standard size trees. It does require a lot more pruning, especially for some varieties that are a lot more vigorous, but for the Florida Prince Peach, I feel like it worked out pretty good. I really liked the shape that it wound up having. The next question is, how often do I fertilize? Initially, I started fertilizing every single month, but then as time went on and I got busier and everything just became a lot hotter, especially in the low desert, I was experiencing a lot of those negative symptoms of heat exhaustion. And so it just became too dangerous for me to realistically be able to fertilize every single fruit tree, because let me tell you, by the end of my journey in Serendipity of Eternal Summer Street in the low desert zone 9B, it was so hot I couldn't tolerate the heat anymore. And even now, when it gets just slightly hot, if I'm outside for too long, I start to overheat and I start to feel very nauseous and not very good, very clammy. Because of that, I switched over to fertilizing whenever I could, whenever the weather wasn't scorching, which was not as often as you would think. And instead, what I mostly focused on was, number one, making sure that the containers were set up on drip irrigation so that I didn't have to do anything on my end. I just had to make sure that my timer was on, and I was watering this tree and basically all of my fruit trees 4 times a day on slow drip irrigation. Now, for the exact times, it just varied depending on what time of the year it was. So I would just sort of experiment and see what happened for a couple of weeks. So for example, I might start off with 10 minutes 4 times a day at different times of the day. And then if I felt like the trees still needed a little bit more, if they were still showing signs of a lot of heat stress, which is going to happen no matter what, especially in the low desert because the sun is just so intense, then I would move it up a little bit, maybe switch over to 12 minutes and then see how that worked out. And then whenever it did get slightly cooler, or when I finally added shade cloth over everything, the white 50% shade cloth, I at one point had to lower it because the water wasn't evaporating quite as fast. And what zones does it work for? I think I already told you this, but it is suited for zones 8 through 10. I'm in zone 7 now, so I'm going to try and see if I can keep it alive here, give it some protection, and see if I can get fruit. But in the meantime, I'm also adding a lot of other varieties that I could never plant before, because now I actually have chill hours. In fact, currently it is so nice and crisp and chilly outside, especially in the mornings. Oh, I love it so much. It's something that I wished for all the time when I lived in the low desert, and now that I live in zone 7, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the weather that I yearned for, the weather that I was meant for, you know what I mean? So anyways, if you go onto Google, type in your zip code and growing zone, and it'll tell you based on your zip code what growing zone you're in. If you're anywhere in 8, 9, or 10, this tree will probably be one of your favorites once you try the fruit. And I'll see if I can find the tree online, and if I'm able to, I'll go ahead and tag it in the video. You might see it pop up. If you're able to click on it, it'll take you to the website so that you can go ahead and purchase it if you are interested. I thought I was done, but the last thing I wanted to mention is the whole fertilizing schedule. So as I mentioned earlier, I started off by fertilizing every single month when I first planted these trees. But then once I realized, hey, this is probably not a good idea because I'm not feeling so well being out here spending hours trying to fertilize dozens and dozens of fruit trees, and then alongside all the other smaller containers of other edible plants that I was growing, I then switched over to fertilizing just whenever I got a chance. But what really helped keep these trees nice and healthy despite not being fertilized on a very rigid, regular schedule was the fact that I added red wriggler worms into all of the containers. And the way I did this is, it started off with this small bag of red wriggler worms specifically because those are really good for vermicomposting. A lot of the times you'll see gardeners doing things like maybe digging a hole and putting a basket in there and then throwing the scraps in along with red wriggler worms, and then the worms eat all of the scraps, break it down, leave behind garden gold, which is their worm castings, aka worm poop, and then they're able to travel throughout the garden bed. So what I started doing was actually just farming them in my garage. Well, first I started off in my laundry room, and then with the vibration of the washer and dryer, the worms were trying to escape. So then I switched over to the garage where it was cool and dark because we had a little AC unit in there, and they loved it. So what I would do is periodically I would take handfuls of those worms and I would dig a hole into all of the pots of trees, and then I would put the red wriggler worms in there. Then I would cover it up, and whenever the trees dropped their leaves, I wouldn't try and remove them or anything. I would put them back onto the pot. Whenever I did get a chance, I would top off the pots with compost and any other sort of organic matter. If I had a couple of food scraps, for my kitchen, I would chop them up, go put them in there. And I never really removed anything from the pots. I just continuously added more organic matter, whether that be any plants that I pulled from the garden that I chopped up and then tossed in there, then covered with compost, or leaves that I used to mulch the top, any sort of wood mulch, any sort of straw, or any other soil amendments. I just continuously added organic matter year after year. And that helped a ton because now the worms had something to eat, which is all of that organic matter. They would break that down, and then they would leave their worm castings behind. Again, their worm poop. And this made it so that those worm castings made the soil super rich. The worms traveling throughout the pot aerated the soil that was in there, which made it so that it stayed nice and fluffy. And what helped to keep those worms, along with any other insects or organisms that were inside of those pots, alive, was having drip irrigation so that the soil didn't dry out. And that is basically what helped to keep this tree going strong up until I was able to get it in the ground here in Zone 7. So with that said, that is the last thing I think I wanted to mention. And honestly, if you want to grow a peach tree and you live somewhere where it's hot, this is one of the varieties that I 100% recommend. In fact, okay, see, this is why I have to set timers. The last thing I wanted to mention is I actually performed my first graft and my only ever successful graft using part of a little branch from this Florida Prince peach, and I grafted it onto what used to be a Contender peach, which at the time that I purchased it, I didn't know that it wasn't suitable for my area, and it required way too many chill hours, which meant that it was never going to really do anything for me. So I chopped it off and then I grafted on a piece of the Florida Prince peach, and I still have that tree to this day. So this tree overall is just very meaningful to me because it has sentimental value, but also it's very delicious. So with that said, I hope that this was a little bit helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next diary entry. Bye.